Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, Roommate Thought She Was Smarter. Got her evicted and made her move back in with her mama. Me and roommate, we'll call Jen. I was heading out the door for work but the phone rang and I decided to pick up. Hi Jen, this is XYZ Moving Company looking to confirm your move on such and such a date. I thought, oh wow, coincidence, they had my roomie's name correct but must have wrong number as we're not moving. We just renewed our lease for another year. Puzzled and wanting to help, I asked them who they were trying to reach. Now here's where the crap got real. They confirmed roomie Jen's info down to her last name, address, and an overview of items to be moved. What the hell? Stunned, I informed caller that I'm not Jen, I'm her roomie, and we just signed a new lease for another year. And I was completely stunned and in shock. I asked him to hang up, call back and leave voicemail. And to pretty please not inform my roomie of our conversation. I left for work. And where we worked, same company, just different shifts, we crossed paths. And I asked her what's up but never letting on that I knew about her secret moving out plan. And gave her the next day to come clean. We were both off. I asked so many questions, seriously dumb crap, never figured out I knew. Then I plotted my revenge. Her planned move date was in 6 weeks. I called the landlord, told him what happened. And he agreed to evict her before the 6 weeks were up and give me time to get situated as I couldn't afford the full lease on my own. And he would not penalize me for breaking the lease, however would lodge her lease break with the rentals man. Then I called a real estate agent, booked some showings, chose a house, made an offer with a quick closing, 10 days, and it was accepted. All without Jen knowing. And all this time, Jen never said a word about her moving out. A few days before my home closing, landlord and I meet with Jen and I tell her I'm moving out and landlord follows up with her formal eviction. Gave her a few days to get out. You should have seen her face. But what we didn't know is she postponed her move as she was no longer moving in with her married boyfriend. Of course he didn't leave his wife and the so-called apartment he had for them was nothing but smoke. She tried to find another apartment but because of her red flag with the rentals man, no landlord would rent to her. She ended up having to crawl back to mommy. And she paid double for her move because the moving company knew all about her conniving butt and when she called them to organize the move they doubled their price. Wanna break your lease with your roomie? End up evicted, blacklisted, single, and as an adult having to move back with mommy. The next one is titled, Help Destroy My Trust in Humanity? I put you on the news. Once upon a time, I, almost 49 female, had an extremely close friend, Mindy. Hell, she was not just my friend, she was like a sister. We met in grade school. She pursued my friendship, always tried to sit next to me, always wanting to talk. Over the years, we would spend lots of time at each other's houses, but by the time we were 19, my house was our meeting place because she had extremely bad family trouble. My parents kind of informally took her in because they sympathized with her situation. I always tried to make her feel like she belonged and avoided luxurious stuff if she could not afford it, expensive shows, nice clothes she might like but could not wear. Other times, I just gave her some stuff from my closet. She was nice, outspoken, and made me feel like I had the most loyal friend on the planet. The years go by. I'm fresh out of college and got a nice job. Mindy's life has improved. She had her own place and 9-to-5 very reliable job. By then, we had a group of friends. All young professionals trying to make our way. I remember that time in my life as bittersweet. We would often reminisce of our college days, and, because this happened in the 90s, there were no social networks, no texting. If you wanted to get in touch, you had to exchange phone numbers or emails. Now it's fairly easier. So exchanging old stories glued us together as we wondered how things worked out for friends we may never see again. Gatherings and get-togethers happened in my apartment. I loved that place. It was spacious, still half empty because I was careful not to throw too much money into decoration. Around those days, Mindy began to look sickly and quite not herself. I was worried and loved her to death. She had been there for me. Especially when my fiancé broke up with me for no reason. I guess we now call it ghosting. He was the first man I ever truly loved. I was never able to get him to express his love like I did, but I accepted him for who he was. He had some cold stages which left me wanting, but I thought I could manage. Basically, I was settling for being breadcrumbed. He was gorgeous, successful, and protective. So when he proposed, I was on cloud 9 and decided to ignore the negatives. I had saved a lot of money for our wedding. To be fair, he did the same in a separate banking account. Things came to an end when all of a sudden, he broke up with me. He told me he did not want to get married and did not love me nor wanted any type of relationship. He let me keep the money from our joint account plus some of his things at the apartment, workout bench, clothing, pretty much everything. This had a bad effect on me. I felt like he despised me and wanted to cut ties no matter the cost. Invitations had not been issued, so calling off the engagement was not such an ordeal. Mindy was there for me, listening to my pain, my rants and endless sobbing. I lost so much weight I was embarrassed to be seen out on the street. She had a boyfriend, George, and he was awesome about letting me crash at their place whenever anguish and pain hit me hard. They both cut ties with my ex. I had made so many life-altering decisions for him only to be left in the dark. Mindy and George sat me down and disclosed that my ex was seeing someone else. I remember the shock and emotional pain. My heart was racing and I ran to the bathroom because the bad news made me throw up. I never understood how my ex treated me like that. Those Christmas were so bad. I would sit in my living room staring at the wall. Mindy and George helped me set up a very 90s posh concept Xmas tree to cheer me up, only white lights, a few golden ornaments and natural pine. I was so depressed the tree stayed put until next spring. By summer, Mindy broke some devastating news. She was terminally ill. I was so angry. She didn't deserve this. Her diagnosis was grim. So bad, that George proposed earlier than he had planned because he wanted to live in the moment. She had always dreamed of a huge wedding. It was her obsession. We would go into bridal shops and try as many dresses as possible when we were teenagers. The wedding of her dreams was now out of the question. Her family would not pitch in, she'd left their home on very bad terms, and George could not pay it on his own. George was now barely out of medical school and up to his neck in debt. I decided to pay for her wedding. It would be a small event, but I would make sure the decorations and her dress were as dreamy as she had always wanted. I still had the money I had saved for my wedding, and as financially risky or stupid as it may have sounded back then, I was sure those final days with Mindy would be worth gold when she was gone. Her illness made me realize there are worse things in this life other than being unceremoniously dumped by my ex. I threw myself into it. I was also happy and hopeful, as Mindy was able to go to her chemo sessions by herself without becoming too sick. She also looked much better than other patients. Our group of friends also helped her a lot. There was not a day when someone would not bring her groceries or help pay for a random utility bill, as she was now out of work. I had initially offered to help her set up a better health insurance plan, but she declined. Pay attention to this, more on this later. So I decided not to intrude and give her the fairy tale wedding, or as close to it that I could, that she wanted. She had picked a nice rental dress and tiara. The florist was to accommodate her taste and create an indoor garden. The venue would be my apartment. The baker had been retained for a 6-tier wedding cake. There would be 35 people. With tables, an aisle and a musician to play some music. We could not do the loud disc jockey thing. Now, back to the insurance issue. My first job was as a junior sales executive for a health insurance company. There was a legal dispute against another insurer and I was called in by the court to be a witness. As I was getting cleared to enter the building, I saw my ex. My stomach churned. I immediately thought courtroom wedding. By the time I reached for the elevator, he had already vanished. That messed up my day. I relived the lack of closure all over again. I could not let it go. I contacted a good friend who I knew was doing her law internship at the court district. She helped me by checking any legal records regarding my ex. No court wedding. I was relieved. I know it sounds silly, but there was a fraud claim and he was the plaintiff. I didn't make much of it, but it was strange. He was very smart and getting screwed out of his money sounded too uncharacteristic. I still wanted to help Mindy and tried to set her up with a good insurance plan. I knew it was difficult given that companies treat terminal patients as money-dumping risks. I pleaded with my old boss and he searched her name, but she was not in the company database. Maybe she was using a different insurer, but that was odd because she clearly told me what her insurance company was. I felt guilty because I was kind of snooping. Things were normal for a month, until my friend at the courthouse broke some disgusting news. The defendant in my ex's lawsuit was my best friend, Mindy. She asked me if I knew anything about it. I had no idea or clue. She then disclosed that the case had become popular gossip among courtroom clerks because my ex had fallen for a complicated Cupid scam. As it turned out, Mindy and my ex had an illicit love affair behind George's back and mine. It spanned a full year. And she was not out of work. She had been fired for embezzlement and larceny, stealing from an employer. I did know that she kept moving apartments, but I thought she had been trying to save on rent, so she had kept looking for cheaper and cheaper places. She moved around towns in the same city. First she took my ex's money for some investment and she used her former employer's credibility for it, never got too many details. Then she got him to help her with medical bills, and scammed him out of close to $20,000. Her illness was fake. I avoided her for a week. I hired a pie to help me get whatever I could, without much hope as their affair had ended. The pie managed to help me get some closure. His name was on her lease for a small studio. Everyone in the building thought they were a couple. It was their love nest and it was 2 hours away. I never suspected anything. But apparently, he had been lying to me about his actual working hours. He had also helped cover for her car payment at least 6 times in a year. She had my ex as her sugar daddy. She had seen me cry, puke, curl on my bed and had broken the news that he had someone else, herself. My ex seemed salty over the fact that she had chosen to stick with George. It was simple math. My ex was very successful, but George, although not wealthy yet, had become a physician and was spoken for to start a small practice with a potential partner. She upped and left and cheated him out of money along the way. Apparently my ex figured out she had been lying about her condition. The disgust, pain and disappointment hit me fairly hard, but somehow, I had so heavily invested myself in helping her that I had emptied myself of any potential nerve-wracking reaction. I was numb. I went straight to all the wedding vendors and cancelled before it was too late to get my money back. I defunded her wedding. No cake, no dress and no veil. I sat down with George on a Friday afternoon and offered him all evidence and proof. He cried, but at the end admitted to feel painfully relieved. Yes, he loved her, but he had felt pressured to get married. He confessed too many red flags. She always went to her medical appointments by herself and became irritated if he asked too many questions. She had shown him some test results that were incredibly well crafted, but now knowing what she had done he thought the medical documents could be fake. He confirmed that the sneaky way, having his nurse ex-roommate run her name in the computer at where she claimed to be her doctor's office, it was logical on her part as back then, a fairly small town had only one oncologist. We also suspected that she may have been having a new affair as she spent more and more weekends with her all-girls church camping group. She claimed it was her sanctuary and helped her a lot. It may have been a front. George and I accepted the fact that we had been cheated, taken advantage of and emotionally destroyed by the same person. I personally felt a loss of innocence. Now I understood why she wanted to keep her wedding thing almost a secret. It may have been possible that making it public may have blown her cover, one way or the other. George and I decided to do what was right. I paid for a video tribute to my loyal friend and decided to send it to the local news as the heartwarming story of love and healing. It featured her and George's apartment compound on purpose so that everyone wanting to serve her court papers could find her. I did not want to see her and I made up excuses, but George had a hard time feigning happiness once she had returned from her camping trip. It was an agonizing week. The news weren't showing our positive note yet and we were sick with the waiting. It all blew up on Tuesday morning. The news channel enthusiastically showcased our story with a collage and lots of information about her and how she was about to get married and had almost already beaten cancer. Dozens of ill-spoken haters popped from out of nowhere. As it turns out, this had been her second illness story. I never knew someone so close to me could lead such a scummy double life. My ex went straight to the channel and was interviewed. Oh man. It was pathetic. He poured his heart out about how crazy in love he had been and how she had only used him. I think by then he did not care if all our friends and families found out what he had done. George confronted her with all the information. She denied it, then said it was a lapse of bad judgment. She moved out without too much drama. It took George over a decade to forgive himself for allowing someone to make him look so stupid as a person and as a physician. She left me some voicemails with lots of excuses. I picked the phone only once and told her I had defunded and pulverized her wedding and that it was me who told George what was going on. I used a leveled voice to tell her to never call me again unless she wanted to find out how far I would go to see her pay for her unlawful actions. I cried immediately after I hung up. It was so surreal. George and I slowly found normality. But it took some time. He dated a couple of girls here and there but was not ready. I myself became shut down. She avoided jail I don't know how, even when our mutual friends filed petty claims for all the money they invested buying her stuff while she carried on her false pretenses. Eventually, I used the wedding money to partner with George and we opened a small clinic. Best decision ever. Over the years, George and I became best friends and grew closer. We got married some years ago and are proud parents to a happy family. Fun fact, I got a FB message from her 7 years ago. She began very sweetly but then proceeded to blame me and accused her of stealing her man and her life. I blocked her. Fun fact 2, I ran into my ex in 2001. He apologized profusely. I accepted his apology and told him it all worked out as I now have a life with someone who truly deserves me. Back then George and I had begun dating. Fun fact 3, Mindy avoided doing time for her deeds back then, but was prosecuted for setting up crowdfunding for a fake cause and stealing from an elderly person. The last one is titled, Sometimes Revenge Comes from Being Professional. A couple of years ago, my husband and I moved to his hometown after spending time abroad and starting a business. We needed a job to make ends meet as we grew our business. So we both took a job as a server, bartender at a beautiful historic inn and restaurant in our town. The bosses were an old couple. We realized pretty quickly that the woman of the couple wore the pants, and that she had no idea what she was doing. In addition to this, she was a real butthole. The place was horribly mismanaged, in a market where it was impossible not to make money. However, the hours were convenient since the restaurant was only open on a limited schedule. And we were the only servers who didn't have terrible substance abuse issues, so we quickly became the de facto managers. We are both business-minded people, and we started thinking that we could really run the place well if given the opportunity. After being there about 6 months, we made the owners an offer to run the hotel and restaurant for a year for a small salary. But with the potential for a huge bonus at the end of the year, calculated as a hefty percentage of any increase in profit over the prior year. After looking at all the numbers, we realized quickly that we had the potential to make a lot of money very quickly, with almost no expenses, as we would be living and eating there too. So when the owners accepted, we hit the ground running, and within 2 months, we were on track to quadruple the profit of the previous year. Not to brag, there was some seriously low-hanging fruit. Quickly, however, there were some big problems. We'd been told that we would get to move into the owner's suite quickly after we got some experience under our belts. But that never happened, so we spent the entire year living in a hotel room. We'd been told that we would have free rein in decision-making, but continued to be micromanaged like crazy, just absolutely moronic crap like not putting flat and fitted sheets in the same washer. And we thought we knew what we were getting into with our bosses, but they turned out to be crazier than we ever anticipated. I could write a book on these people, and I actually am working on one. But for the sake of brevity, I will just say this: the guy of the couple was nutty, volatile, racist, and sexist, but I would have worked for 5 of him before I had to put up with one of his wife. She was all of the above, plus dishonest, greedy, conniving, manipulative, judgmental, haughty, and nearly every other vile attribute you can think up, all with the face of a bulldog eating a lemon. And we lived with them. We were never off the clock, and besides the part of the winter when the hotel closed for renovations, we had 3 days off the whole year, which we had to fight for tooth and nail. She wouldn't let us hire someone to work the night shift, so with our huge increase in business, this meant that we were often taking calls until 3 or 4 in the mornings on in-season weekend nights. We were exhausted and beat down, and even though we were racking up a large sum of money, our other business had a breakthrough, and we knew we couldn't last another year. We really turned the place around in a year. The owners were generally disliked in our small southern town, so we did a huge job in improving the public face of the business. Suddenly we had a local clientele. We were getting phenomenal reviews. We cleaned out the dead-weight staff and retrained the ones worth a damn. The chef, who was also a butthole, hated the shake-up and being held accountable for the first time ever. So he tried to play hardball with the owners, he pulled at them or me, and we'd made them a ton of money, whereas he had never had a restaurant year in the black. Sue. He got his walking papers and we got a way better chef. The business was outpacing our wildest expectations, and we were setting up the following year to be a truly exceptional year as well. Even though we knew we couldn't stick it out again, we wanted to do all we could to set them up for success. A month before our contract was up, we told the owners we would not be renewing our contract for the following year. They were shocked. We offered to stick around to help train a new management team and do whatever we could to make a smooth transition. We showed them the numbers, where we could hire a good GM, a restaurant and events manager, and around-the-clock front desk team for less than they would end up paying us for the year. They could sit on their biscuits and take it easy. They said they'd think about it. Come to find out through offhand little comments that the lady owner thought we were lazy and weren't working all that hard. She couldn't believe they'd gotten duped into paying us such a huge percentage of the profits. She had no concept of the additional workload that comes with tripling the business levels. They decided to go back to doing it all themselves. I will say that telling our team that we were leaving was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. A lot of tears were shed, especially from the old-timers who knew how bad it was before we came. There was a bit Stockholm Syndrome going on in the early days. To the dismay of the owner, I'd also sent emails to all of my contacts, vendors, clients, customers, that we were moving on and that we'd been proud to continue the tradition of excellence. She hadn't wanted me to reach out and just wanted to tell them we were gone when they called. Because that's super professional. We said our goodbyes with a fat check in our hands, and got the hell out of Dodge. We'd secretly bought a house 5 hours away, so we moved away in a jiffy. Now for revenge, when I realized that they didn't want to hire a new management team, we worked on compiling a huge manual for them on all new procedures, all events we'd booked, etc. I convinced them to sit down with me and go over it, but they didn't take it seriously, so I also trained the staff on whatever I could. That all fell apart immediately. The owner told the staff that we'd let them get lazy and that things would be changing. In her mind, this meant calling up events that had already signed contracts and try to squeeze more out of them, in spite of the fact that we'd nearly doubled the average event value and booked twice the events. And overstaffing servers, who she didn't have to pay much, and understaffing housekeepers, who she did have to pay. Oh, and overtime pay? It doesn't matter that you worked 45 hours, she's not paying time and a half. I'm aware that the last one is illegal and I've informed the affected employees as such. She was also drinking more than ever and verbally berating both staff and guests. We had prided ourselves on making our staff feel valued and appreciated, and they were loyal because of it. What she failed to realize was that they were loyal to us, not to the business or to her. So they left. All of them. That great new chef? He quit less than a month after we left. All the wait staff? They followed suit one by one. The entire housekeeping staff, all of whom had been there for over 4 years? They quit last week. The whole housekeeping staff. It's the middle of the high season and the owners had to clean 45 rooms. The chef they hired to replace the other chef walked out. They've now been through 3 chefs in 10 months. The reviews are plummeting. My husband's parents still live in the town, and people often ask about us to wish us well. We left politely and spoke highly of the owners to anyone who would listen, but everyone tells his parents that they couldn't believe we were able to do it for a year. We genuinely wanted the place to succeed and did everything we could to set it up for success, but after they don't give a crap on all the work we did, it's more than a little satisfying to see them finally appreciate how hard we worked. Thanks for listening.